Hey friends, I'm Glenn Thomas, and in this video, I want to go a little deeper into direct electric guitar into Ableton Live and make it sound really good in a mix. How can we go from sounding a little bit like this to a little more like this? Let's talk about that. So what am I doing here? The first thing that I am doing is a little bit of a trick that I like to use oftentimes, partly just because it's a little bit easier to do with one guitar, is I like to, as you see here, I like to make my electric guitars into basses. So this track, you can see I have just octaved down. So if I go back to this and we'll turn off the effects that I've turned on, then we go to the clip, we put it back up to normal. You'll listen, this track, just an electric guitar. Take that down to -12. You got yourself a bass, which is great. So that's the first little trick. A little bonus for you is take a direct guitar in and octave it down for a nice bass sound. But we don't just leave it there. Then after we've done that, what we will do is we will come in and do our processing. So let's talk about this guitar first, because a lot of you, based on the previous video that I had done on direct guitar into Ableton Live, which you can check out in the cards above, a lot of you said, yeah, but what about some distorted guitar? So that's what I want to kind of cover today, is a few things. If you've seen the previous video I did, I talk about how I like to approach designing these types of sounds from the standpoint of an amp. And so I've got drive going into EQ and then kind of an effects loop style delay in this case. On the bass, I'm still doing kind of the same thing where I'm using a quote unquote amp. I'm doing a bit of compression, hitting some saturation, hitting a little bit of chorus, and then into the amp as well. So again, this is kind of like a drive pedal on the ground, the saturation over here, the chorus is another pedal, and then you kind of hit your amp because amps really add EQ. I do have a utility here just to ensure that my bass stays mono. Even though I could mono the bass only, the bass frequencies, I actually want this whole track to be mono. Otherwise, I just have a serum, a little bit of a pad in, and then a 212 kit that seemed to work pretty well. And so overall, it sounds kind of like this with the direct guitar sounds. So this is without the processing on, and this is with the guitar tuned down an octave to a bass. It sounds like this. So let's solo those real quick. I mean, it's not bad. Even in the midst of a mix, you know, that could work. But how do we make it be even better still? So that's when what we will do is we'll come in here and again, we'll talk about this guitar. Let's turn this on. So saturator, I'm just pushing some hefty drive into the saturator, 24 dB of drive in, but I'm also cutting then the output volume, giving a little bit of a shift to the bass frequency response there, just to get the tone I want. But then again, EQ is where you start to make it really sound like an amp without using amp simulators. So I've given a peak here, and then I've cut a bit just right here, cut off the top and the bottom. And this EQ setting is the sound that I want. So we go from sounding like this into the amp sound. Turn off that delay for a second. And that really starts to sound like an amp and an electric guitar that I would use in a mix. Turn that delay back on, get a little more stereo width. From this to that. Great, so that's cool. I like that. So again, you just kind of approach it from a listening ear and the thought of let's build our signal chain just like you would an amp. So let's move over to the bass then. What are we doing with the bass? Similarly, we'll turn our processing on. Compressor, just keep it a little bit more consistent. And we're driving 33 hefty decibels, almost 34 decibels of drive into this thing. Pulling the output back 18 and the bass of the frequency response is back a little bit more. Again, these two sections down here do a little bit to shape the tone. And so I like to set this, in this case, down there. That's just what sounded good. Added a little bit of chorus, and I don't know that aside from the dry wet, I changed anything from the stock preset because it sounded good. So for this bass amp, this is the frequency response that seemed to be a pretty good fit for me. So let's take a listen just to the bass, which again, remember, is a direct tracked guitar, electric guitar. And I think that sounds so good. That'll work for me, especially in a mix, right? All right, so let's turn on this processing and hear what we're doing with that then. So again, let's turn some of this off and we'll just kind of go down the line. A little bit of compression, just keep things more equaled out. I'm not using the makeup gain on this one. I am doing a little bit of a dry wet, so there is some still dry, unprocessed sound coming through. Then we drive into the saturator here, which by itself, that's not a bad tone either. Add some chorus. Just some things start moving. If I really turn off this mono, you get a sense of that too. But I'd like to keep it mono here. And then that EQ right here, this is what makes the biggest difference to your tone. And that's what, again, some of this helps it sound like an amp, some of it helps it sit in the mix. So altogether then, the two guitars. Let's get this rack turned on as well here. So there's some overdriven guitars and overdriven bass. Let's turn the mix on. Again, unprocessed guitars. Processed guitars. So again, this is just coming from a single coil electric guitar plugged straight into my interface and then affected with the signal chain to help it sound like an amped electric guitar. In this case, we're driving it. Last time we kept it clean. Again, if you haven't seen that video, check up in the description or in the cards above to check that out. And hopefully this was helpful for you and that you can see that it really doesn't take that much to get some of your tones and sounds to sound good, even if you don't have the expensive amp simulators. Yes, sometimes those will get a better tone for what you're looking for, but a lot of times you can get a good tone that sits in the mix just by using the stock plugins that are built into Ableton or any other DAW. Recently, I've been using Reaper a lot, and that's been really fun to just dive in and try some of those stock plugins as well. So hopefully this was helpful for you. If it was, I'd love it if you'd hit that thumbs up, and if you'd subscribe, I would be grateful. Also, if you'd share this with your friends, if it was very helpful for you, I'd appreciate that as well. I hope that you're doing good in this time, and I will catch you on the next one.